Hello, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. It's nice to be with you. I'm filling in for Rabbi Berger, who's on vacation this week, and it's nice to be back in the sanctuary with you. Our services will begin with the lighting of the Shabbat candles, which is on pages 2 and 3, I believe. I think I still remember. And the page numbers. And we will be led by Allison tonight. And we continue on page 6 with a reading in anticipation of our sanctuary reopening. Hopefully our lay leadership will decide to reopen it to anyone who wishes to worship. I hope they maintain the requisite that anyone who enters be vaccinated, that they maintain that requirement. But hopefully they will open it to anyone who wishes to attend as long as they're vaccinated, sometime in the not too distant future. And when it does, may we return to being the warm, welcoming home for people who want this sanctuary to be its home and this congregation to be its home. And so we join together in expressing that hope. That's our tradition. It's our heritage in this congregation. And hopefully that heritage will be honored as the synagogue soon reopens. We read together on page 6 at the bottom. May the door of this synagogue be wide enough to receive all who hunger for love, all who are lonely for friendship. May it welcome all who have cares to unburden, thanks to express, hopes to nurture. May the door of this synagogue be narrow enough to shut out pettiness and pride, envy and enmity. May its threshold be no stumbling block to young or straying feet. May it be too high to admit complacency, selfishness, and harshness. May this synagogue be, for all who enter, the doorway to a richer and more meaningful life. And considering the same theme, emphasizing the same theme, we join Allison now in singing Shalom Aleichem, which of course means we welcome all of you. Shalom, of course, means many things. Literally, it means wholeness. We use it to mean peace, but it also means we welcome you. And Aleichem means you, to you, peace to you, greetings to you. And may that be, again, the motto of this synagogue when it reopens. Thank you, Tina, for telling me. May that, again, be our synagogue's hallmark when it reopens. Allison?
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharet,
Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei HaMelachim,
HaKadosh Baruch
page 24. Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Yom, Malachei Hamlochim, Kadosh Baruch Hu. Chuni l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi melech, Malachei Hamlochim, Kadosh Baruch Hu. L'chem l'shalom, Mi melech Malachim Kadosh Baruch Hu. And we turn to page 26, where Allison will chant the Reader's Kaddish, and we will join at the appropriate lines. Thanks, Lillian.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah v'yamad yivrach yurtei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei de kol beit Yisrael bagala u'v'zman kariv
V'Imaru, Amen. Yehei Rabbah mevarach, le'olam lo me'omaya, yitbarach.
Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yiroman v'yidnosei v'yitadar v'yidaleh v'yidalal shemei dekudesha brichu le'elha min kol birchata v'shirata
Tushbechata v'nechemata dahamiran bi'alma v'imaru. Amen. And we turn to page 26. And those of you who are at home, if there's a place where you can rise, this would be a good time to do so as we rise in the sanctuary. Page 28. Lie, 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 lie. Adonai HaMevorach Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Voed. If you can, please remain standing, and if you like, please read along with me on page 30. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim B'chochmo poteach sha'arim, uvitvuna mishana itim, umachalif et hazmanim, umisader et hachochavim b'mishmerotehem, b'rakia kirtzono. Borei yom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or. Uma avir yom umevdi laila, umavdil bein yom uvein laila, Adonai tzavaot shemo. El chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim. And we continue now with the prayer on page 32, Ahavat Olam. You know, all of these prayers are old. Most of them are 1,000, some 2,000 years old, some a little newer. But we sing them with melodies that have been written usually over the more recent centuries. And Allison, I see, has chosen to utilize a melody composed by my son-in-law tonight. Thank you, Cantor Marshall Campbell. This is a melody he composed to this prayer, Ahavat Olam. And we continue with the meditation that in our synagogue we often use when we're preparing to affirm our faith with the words of the Shema. So let us join Alice in Open Up Our Eyes. And if you want to look for the words, although I think you all know it, it's on page 373.
Open up our eyes, teach us how to live, fill our hearts with joy and all the love you have to give. Gather us in peace as you lead us to your name, and we will know that you are one. And we will know that you are one. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kivod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed.
Please be seated. And let's read together in Hebrew on page 36, the continuation of that Shema prayer. Va'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uv'lechtecha v'aderech u'shochbecha uv'kumecha u'kshartam la'ot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha u'chetavtem al mezuzot beitecha uvi sha'arecha lama'an tizkeru va'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'item kedoshim le'Elohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohim ani Adonai Elohechem. And let's read the translation together too. Same page, 36. You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign upon your hand and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Thus shall you remember to observe all my commandments and to be holy to your God. I am Adonai, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai, your God. And we continue on page 39, reading responsively. In a world torn by violence and pain, a world far from wholeness and peace, give us the courage to say, Adonai, there is one God in heaven and earth. Together, the high heavens declare your glory. May earth reveal your justice and love. From bondage in Egypt, we were delivered. At Sinai, we bound ourselves to your way. Inspired by prophets and instructed by sages, time and again we overcame oppressive forces. Though our failings are many and our faults are great, it has been our glory to bear witness to our God, keeping alive in dark ages your vision, O God, of a world redeemed. Let us continue to work for the day when the nations will be one and at peace. Then shall we rejoice as Israel did, singing on the shores of the sea. Nora, Tehilot, Ose, Fele, Nora, Tehilot, Ose, Ose. And on page 42, we have our prayer called Hashkivenu, with which we ask God to bless us with a restful night's sleep and then to restore us to life renewed in the morning. And Allison will chant that prayer for us now. Let's read together on page 43. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom, Aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim. Amen. And on page 46, we find the beginning of our tefillah. Tefillah means prayer. This is the central prayer of the worship service, and it continues on 48, and we'll also continue on 50 with it. If you can, please rise.
Adonai, Sifat Eternal God, open my lips that my mouth may declare your glory. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, El Gadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imaot, U'Mevii Gula Livnei Bneihem, L'ma'an Shemo Ve'ava, Melech Uzer U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Ve'ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayei Hakol, Atarav LaHoshia, Morid Hatal, Mechachel Chaim B'Chesed, Mechayei Hakol B'Rachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim V'Rofei Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umechayem Emunato, Lishenei Afar, Michamocha B'al Gevurot, Umidom Elach, Melech Memit Umechayeh, Umatzliach Yeshua, V'ne'eman Atah Lechachayot Hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh Hakol.
Please remain standing if you can and turn back to 49. Those of you who have books, I realize that what I'm doing may be a little confusing for those of you who are at home and don't have books and have to depend upon the screen, as I'm not doing exactly the same readings that Rabbi Berger picked out and put on the screen. I just realized that a moment ago. Next time, before I do services, I'll tell him which ones I want to have and have him put them on the screen. But I want to read, and if you have it, you can read along with me, a contemporary interpretation of part of the prayer that Allison just chanted. This interpretation emphasizes the concept of Jewish peoplehood. Page 49. Some perished by fire, some by water, some crossed the sea or watered the desert, some starved all week to make a Shabbat feast, some were left childless until old age, some lifted their chins beneath a father's knife. Those who came before us gave everything so that we, generations later, could glorify you, O God. And despite the dangers, with your protection, some did survive and even flourished. Some reaped in joy, were spared the knife, were granted children. We are their inheritors, O God, and we know how rare is our good fortune to be born to such hard-won treasures. A great responsibility is ours, and yours as well. For if you do not sustain us as you did Abraham and Sarah, Rebekah and Isaac, Jacob, Rachel, and Leah, then who will sing your praises? Who will lift their chins as we have done now to sanctify your name? Baruch atah Adonai, Poked Sarah, Umagen Avraham. And now you may be seated. It may take me a while to latch on to the age of technology.
You're doing great.
Thanks, Allison. And you are too, as you always do. You bring so much beauty to worship.
Thank you,
Let's read together at the top of page 55. And again, I guess that's not on the screen either, and I apologize, but I just don't feel like it's a service without this reading. It's one of the most beautiful in our prayer book. If you have the book, may these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai Mikadesh HaShabbat. And we pray silently now.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech Adon lechol hashalom. Ki atahu melech Adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. V'tov beinecha levarech et Amcha Yisrael b'chol ein ub'chol shah b'shlomecha. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam.
Before I share my sermon, I just want to add a word of welcome to our congregation, to Joy. It's good to see you here. I've known you for years, and I know that you're a very committed member of the Jewish community and a very fine musician. And I was sad to learn that Tim couldn't continue with us. He and I worked together for over 15 years, and he too is a wonderful person and a wonderful musician. But I'm glad that you are the person who's replacing him. And we thank you for being here. And you played so beautifully tonight, as you have every time I've heard you play over the years, wherever it's been. So thank you. And I also wanted to just add a word to what I said at the beginning about the congregation reopening and our resuming our heritage of being such a warm and welcoming place. In a year and a half of not being able to see each other and not being able to come here, I hope we haven't forgotten how to do that. And I also want to ask that that welcome be extended to my dear successor, Rabbi Berger. He began his rabbinate here under the most difficult of conditions that I could imagine a rabbi ever beginning a new rabbinate in a congregation. And he's done a very good job, in my view. and I'm glad that he's here. The rabbinate is a lonely profession at best. People won't tell a dirty joke in front of a rabbi. Sometimes people don't invite you to their home because they think, he's going to ask me for money for the congregation. It's a lonely profession. And when you move to a new community, no matter what you do, it's lonely, but it's especially lonely as a rabbi. Rabbi Berger hasn't told me any of that. When I ask him how things are going, he always says that they're going well and people are being nice. But I can't imagine that he and his family aren't a little bit lonely coming into a new community where the only way you can see people is via Zoom. And doing that for a year. We're concluding the first year in less than 2 weeks. So keep that in mind when the congregation reopens and life returns to normal. Remember that Rabbi Berger and his family are members of the congregation too. And it would be something you're going out of your way to welcome him, and his family would make me very happy. So. An Israeli on vacation in New York is visiting the Bronx Zoo on a rainy day when he sees a little boy slip and fall into the lion's den. Suddenly, the lion charges the boy and is about to maul him right under the eyes of his screaming parents. The Israeli leaps into the den and hits the lion right on the nose with a powerful Krav Maga punch. Whimpering, the stunned lion jumps back, and the Israeli carries the terrified child to his parents, who thank him profusely. A New York Times reporter happened to be watching the whole event. The reporter says to the Israeli, "Sir, this was the most gallant and brave thing I've ever seen anyone do in my life." The Israeli replies, "Thank you very much, but it was my duty. I saw that little boy in terrible danger and I had to do something." The reporter says, "Well, I'll make sure this doesn't go unnoticed. I'm a reporter and tomorrow's paper will have this on the front page." "So what country are you from anyway? And what do you do for a living?" The Israeli replies, "Oh, I'm from Israel, and I serve in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces." The next morning, the Israeli buys the New York Times to check out the article on the front page. And the headline reads, "Israeli soldier assaults African immigrant and steals his lunch." I laughed when I heard the story the first time, too. It's okay to laugh, but it's sad. That headline, of course, didn't actually appear in the New York Times, but stories that are just as biased against Israel appear in the Times and in other newspapers and media outlets, as well as in classrooms on university campuses, in church sanctuaries, and sometimes even in synagogue sanctuaries, as well as on the streets of cities around the world, and sometimes even in the halls of the United States Congress. Most of the criticism of Israel is based upon falsehoods and is clearly an expression of anti-Semitism, which is an incurable virus that has been in existence since the advent of Christianity and developed from Christianity's teachings that we killed God's incarnation on earth. And since we are thought to have committed this horrible act of deicide, we are therefore capable of any evil. Hence, with the exception of less than a century of a really good life here in the United States, which has now ended, and an occasional short span in other places, Jews around the world have been subjected to terrible mistreatment, and the virus is now again raging around the world, including here in the United States. This is a time of emergency. This is a time for action. Now, although anti-Semitism is an incurable virus, there are ways to fight back and hopefully put it at bay for a while again. David Harris, executive director of the American Jewish Committee, which is, by the way, an organization that I hope you will all support, wrote an outstanding piece this past week that gives concrete suggestions for fighting back. And what I'm going to do now is share a few excerpts from Harris's piece, and then share a few suggestions for fighting back, a few suggestions of my own for fighting back. Harris writes that, first, elected officials should be held accountable for how they react or fail to react when Israel is maligned, or Zionism is demonized, or Jews are threatened, or for that matter, when the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism comes up as a proposal for adoption, which it's doing in several states. Politicians who seek support in every election cycle should understand that these are factors that matter to many of us. They should not be allowed to get away with practice sound bites or glib phrases when they appear in front of a synagogue but then take a different stance elsewhere. Case in point, and this is Harris continuing. In the 11 days of fighting last month, triggered by Hamas-launched rockets at Israel, many political leaders stepped up to express their support and clear understanding of the storyline. But others, including some who purport to be friends of the pro-Israel community, were missing in action or resorting to whispered comments for fear they could otherwise potentially jeopardize their careers. That, says Harris, should be unacceptable. Harris's second point, institutions need to be held accountable. Some colleges and schools support Jewish and pro-Israel students on campus who feel targeted, whether in the classroom or on the quad, while others have betrayed the trust of those students. This is not about asking our institutions to become full-throated supporters of a particular political stance, but rather ensuring that their environments do not become poisoned by hatred, bigotry, intimidation, bullying, or ostracism. Jewish and pro-Israel students have the right to feel safe, protected, free to express their views, and take pride in their identity, no less than any others. If those institutions fail, then they too need to be held to account by trustees, alumni, parents, prospective parents, and others. Harris's third point is that we Jews need to express our pride in being Jewish. I want to suggest that all of you go to the gift shop and buy a mezuzah. Every woman should have a mezuzah to wear around her neck, or a Magen David, and so should every guy. If you're not wearing a tie, fellas, wear a Magen David. We should really express our pride in being Jewish. Harris writes, "This is no time for American Jews to become Marrano Jews. We have not experienced the extraordinary journey from 1654, when the first Jews landed on this soil, to now, to consider now, in 2021, removing the mezuzahs from our doors, or the kippahs from our head, or the word Jewish from the facades of our institutions, or in any other way seeking cover or hiding under the bed. To the contrary, exactly like other Americans, we can and should openly affirm our identity, celebrate our remarkable heritage, and remind ourselves of the manifold contributions of Jews to every facet of American society. Our hashtag should be hashtag Jewish and proud. Fourth, according to Harris, is to embrace Israel. Some Jews seem to believe that distancing, if not detaching themselves from any link with Israel, will protect them, or at the very least endear them to the anti-Israel, anti-Zionist mobs. How tragic that after nearly 1,900 years of Jewish yearning for even a sliver of land where Jews could govern themselves and not be subject to the whim of the majority, the fact that we live in an era of Jewish sovereignty is not universally valued. No, Israel's not a perfect country, nor is any other country on earth, including the United States. Still, the story of Israel is awe-inspiring. It's a metaphor for the triumph of enduring hope over the temptation of despair, and a democratic, progressive beacon in a part of the world with too few counterparts. Harris continues by telling us that in regard to anti-Semitism, it is essential to be swivel-headed. He points out that sometimes Jews on the left point their finger at the far right, while Jews on the right point their finger at the far left, when the truth is they're both correct. The events in Charlottesville, Pittsburgh, Poway, not to mention the conspiracy theories peddled by the likes of QAnon, are stark reminders of the real deadly menace from the far right. Meanwhile, the recent events from the streets of New York to the restaurants of Los Angeles demonstrate that not all threats to Jews today come from the far right. The same can be said for what Jewish and pro-Israel students are facing on some campuses, where once again the danger does not emanate from the far right. And then throw in the ever-present danger of jihadists, too often in alliance with the far left, as we have seen in both the United Kingdom and the United States, it becomes all the more clear that we must have, in Harris's words, a 360-degree view. Harris's sixth suggestion for combating anti-Semitism is that we focus on young Jews. He writes, insofar as one of the major battlefronts has indeed become educational settings, it is all the more important that our children and grandchildren are as prepared as possible for what they may face. In the classroom, there is a power imbalance between, say, a hostile professor or teaching assistant on the one hand, and a student who tries to push back on the other. A young person bucking the politically correct and intersectional crowd could easily face social isolation or worse. When it comes to affirming Jewish identity, Zionism, pro-Israelism, it can require not just confidence in oneself, but also a heavy dose of social courage. That's why if we count on young people to stand up and be heard, then we have to help prepare them for the various situations in which they may find themselves. Plus, they need to feel the support of family, Jewish organizations, Jewish institutions on campus. What's happening is not just battles over, for example, boycott, divestment, and sanctions movements on campuses, but more broadly, a high-stakes fight for the outlook of the next generation of American leaders. Another of Harris's suggestions is to engage partners. In the current moment, amidst this new sense of vulnerability, he tells us, let us be mindful of the fact that polls reveal that large numbers of Americans still support Israel and the U.S.-Israel relationship. Surely a number of studies have also shown that many people regard Jews highly among the panoply of American group identities. So it's not as if we're entirely alone, isolated and friendless. Nor is it as if we, the Jewish community, haven't been a friend to other communities in America over the years, over decades and even centuries, whether it's been in the fight for civil rights or social justice or overcoming unjust immigration restrictions or standing up for other targeted or beleaguered communities. We need to remind these people that true friendships must work both ways, all the more so in times of need. Additionally, Harris feels that we must learn some basic truths. Sure, the Middle East is an informational minefield with competing narratives and storylines racing in every direction, but none of that should obscure some basic facts, such as A, Jews are indigenous to the region, just as Arabs are. B, the relationship between Jews and this part of the world dates back continuously more than 3,500 years. C, Israel's modern-day birthright emanated from the Balfour Declaration, the San Remo Conference, the League of Nations, and the United Nations. D, the Palestinians could have had a state of their own on multiple occasions, beginning in 1947-48, but spurned every opportunity. Israel, and this is E, Israel withdrew lock, stock, and barrel from Gaza in 2005. F, by 2007, Hamas, designated a terrorist organization by both the United States and European Union, seized power. G, the Hamas charter explicitly calls for the destruction of the state of Israel and accuses Jews of fomenting the French Revolution, the First World War, and the Second World War. H, Hamas is funded and supplied by Iran, whose leadership openly calls for the annihilation of Israel. I, Gaza borders with both Israel and Egypt, not just Israel, as many allege. J, Israel is among the most multicultural, multiracial, and multi-faith societies on the planet. K, Israel is a vibrant democracy, and Israeli Arabs, who comprise approximately 20% of the population, can be found on the Supreme Court, in the Knesset, and throughout Israeli society. Lastly, according to Harris, we should draw lessons from Jewish history. It should be abundantly clear from Jewish history that anti-Semites, whether from the far left or the far right, don't differentiate for long between good and bad Jews any more than they would distinguish among Zionists, non-Zionists, or anti-Zionists. Yet astonishingly, some Jews still don't seem to have gotten that message. They think they can buy time or space or security by joining in the assault against Israel, or even by rationalizing attacks against Jews. Sooner or later, though, as has happened over the centuries, their day of reckoning would be likely to come if anti-Semites ever gain sufficient power again. Harris has provided great insights. I think there are a few other things we can also do. First, we can support AIPAC, which educates members of Congress about the truths of the conflict between Israel and her enemies. As you know, I devote a considerable amount of time to raising funds for AIPAC and lobbying members of Congress under AIPAC's auspices. Eileen and I also contribute financially to AIPAC, and I hope you will too. I do this because I think that AIPAC's work in strengthening the United States-Israel alliance is of significant benefit to the Jewish people, to all the citizens of the United States, and all of humankind. And I say all of humankind because I believe that without a strong Israel, the Jewish people cannot flourish and may not be able to survive. That survival will surely be in jeopardy. And without Jews, human civilization will have lost a significant voice of conscience. I also think we should support the American Jewish Committee, the organization that David Harris directs. I hope that you will join Eileen and me in working to elect pro-Israel elected officials and candidates in all aspects of government all over the country, and to defeat those in office who do not support Israel. We are part of an informal political network that raises funds, provides information, and raises funds for pro-Israel candidates and targets those in office who have not been supportive of Israel. And I'd love for you to join us in this endeavor. There are about 20 people in our community who are doing this at the present time, as far as I know. Something else that we can do is educate our fellow Jews and prepare them to educate our Gentile friends. As Harris said, this is especially important in regard to college-age Jews. There's an organization called Stand With Us that produces excellent and concise printed material for this cohort. Stand With Us needs our support. We should also purchase for every college-age and young Jewish adult person we know a new book by Hollywood actress and producer Noah Tishby. And this is the book. It's called Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Nation on Earth. It's written in a language that young adults, college-age kids and young adults, people who are a little older, will relate nicely to. But Eileen and I are reading the book. She's almost through with it. I'm about halfway. And despite the fact that there's a lot of hip lingo in the book, she teaches a tremendous amount of history in a very organized fashion. I recommend buying the book if you have young adult children or grandchildren, but reading it first, because I think you'll benefit from the book as well. And I think, and I'm still involved in the fundraising in this congregation, and I think I'm going to see if we can bring her to this congregation as a possible speaker next year, Noah Tishby. She's the producer of that Netflix show that's currently on called In Treatment, but she's been involved in some other shows as well. I have heard her speak, and she's an amazing, amazing person. I also recommend reading Yossi Klein Halevi's wonderful book, Letters to My Palestinian Neighbor, and a book by Barry Weiss, who was our speaker just before the pandemic began, How to Fight Anti-Semitism. Barry also has a wonderful podcast series entitled Common Sense with Barry Weiss. I recommend, of course, that in addition to providing this information as gifts to everyone you know, you also read these things yourself. The situation is urgent. Before I wish you Shabbat Shalom, I feel that I need to reiterate my theme tonight, which is that if we don't do these things, it may become so difficult to be Jewish that there may be a time in the future when there's nobody to say Shabbat Shalom to each other. Shabbat Shalom, my friends. I've asked Allison to sing a song. It's more than a song. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece to prayer by Naomi Shemer, who wrote Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. The song is called Al Kol Eleh, which means for all these things, or all these things. And it goes on to say, we accept the honey and the sting. The Israelis are doing that for us, for Jews all over the world, and we Jews have done that not only for ourselves, but for every other human being with whom we have ever interacted. But it's time now, while we continue to do it for other people, that we begin to do it more vigorously for our fellow Jews. We continue now with our Misha Beirach for healing, and that can be found on page 253. And I've been provided with a list of people in special need of God's help in healing, and I'll read their names now. Laura Barnett, Lori Bauk, who's doing better, I spoke with her tonight, Charlie Burke, Marcy Bunn, Lisa Cargill, David Curtis, Eddie Deerfield, Matthew Deinhardt, Shirley Dravice, Edie Ekber, Evelyn Edelman, Heather Felser, Harry Fleisch, Denise Freifeld, Leah Gottlieb, Paul Landis, Bob Lapin, Denise Letelier, Arthur Maller, Ray Mankari, Arthur Miller, Arnold Miller, William Miller, Stephanie Ross, Nicole Rubin, and Jeff Stark.
I'd like to add my father, George Stark, as well.
Yes, thank you. So please rise as we join Allison in chanting the Misha Beirach prayer for healing. And Allison, will you chant the Kiddush for us?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. And that's on page 5, I believe, isn't it?
Yes.
5.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratavanu l'shabbat kodsho.
And for the Aleinu, we invite 3 guys who have been part of our congregation forever. Herbie Bloom, Mandy Gordon, and Myron Graff to come to the Bima to open the ark for the Aleinu. Figure out how to divide up the labor. 3 of you.
Aleinu l'shabech ha'adon ha'kol, l'adeit gedula le'otzer bereshit, shelo asanu kigoyei haratzot, ve'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam kelkenu kahem, ve'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, ve'anaknu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim livnei melech malchei hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
The Mourner's Kaddish is on page 294, And tonight we observe the yahrzeit of these members of our congregation and their loved ones: Moshe Aboff, Bernard Aiken, Sophie E. Azursky, Phyllis Boxon, Pauline Brilliant, Sidney Cohen, Isidore Cohan, Lara Curiel, Benjamin Arnold Diamond, Ben Dorman, Toby Dorman, Sidney Gendler, Myra Cohen Gorodeski, Natalie Grauer, Sanford Josephson, Pauline Klein, Sylvia Klein, Brondel Larish, Jack Levin, Leo Loeb Jr., Paula Longboat, Dolores Lucas, Stuart Marcus, Ida Marshlack, Stephen Mellinger, Larry Miller, Richard Morris, Bess Pashkoff, Ramo Ramos, Bernard Saltis, Benjamin Seaman, Leon Skolnick, Seymour Spesser, Harriet Walters, Anna Weiss, and Mary Zweiter. And we also recall the names of several people who died just recently. Hilda Weinberg, aunt of Dolores Turner. Lorraine Rosen, mother of Linda Eisner. Lorraine Spicer, sister of Suzanne Pincus. Sandy Sella Smith, a friend of Esther Klein. Rich Ulrich, friend of Shelley and Jeff Katz. Doug Myers, friend of Tom and Darcy Rose. Elaine Lapin, wife of Bob Lapin. Andrew Shapiro, cousin of Marjorie Graff. And Ken Hoffman, also a friend of Tom and Darcy Rose. All of these people have entered into the peace of life eternal. They still live on earth in the acts of goodness they performed and in the hearts of those who cherish their memories. May the goodness that was part of them abide in this world forever, and may it bring special comfort and inspiration to those who love them. We join together on page 294. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabah, v'yomah divarah chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayei chon uv'yomei chon, uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agolah uv'izman koriv v'yimeru amen. Yehi shemei rabah mevorach le'olam u'le'omei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei dekudashah barichu. Le'elah min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata da'amiran ba'alma v'imeru amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shamaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imeru amen. Osei shalom bimromav hu ya'asei shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imeru amen.
V'imiru, 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 amen. V'imiru, 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 amen.
And you'll join me in saying Motzi. Those of you who haven't had dinner yet. Or if you have, maybe you'll go home for a snack, so Motzi's appropriate for the snack too. Let's sing it.
Mutzi lechem min haaretz. We give thanks to God for bread. Our voices rise in song together as our joyful prayer is said. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Amotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
Have a good Shabbat, a good week.